Gentlemen, welcome back. Folks, thanks for joining us. This is the Wave It Fair podcast. We're on moved our date from Tuesdays for some odd reason to Thursday this week. There was something going on this past Tuesday.
Yeah.
Um, so here we are. We're going to be discussing a couple things today. This is a baseball podcast for folks who just love the game. Please excuse any errors. We're not experts. We're not pretending to be experts. We're just a few guys that like hanging out with our friends and talk about baseball. Mr. Taylor.
Well, my name is Matt, and I am a big baseball and Red Sox fan, and tonight's a big topic for me. Um, and yes, we're not correct on everything, but the three of us are wicked smart. We're fat fellas, let me tell you. And
Yeah,
um, I'm excited about this conversation tonight. I didn't see a lot of the World Series this year, so I'll be interested to see what um, scenarios pop up that I did not see.
excellent.
Yes, indeed. And I'm Quinn Rolo, also baseball fan, particularly the Red Sox, and just enjoy chatting it up with my buds, talking about any number of topics. And the one today that we're going to really be focusing on, I'm interested to hear, some of the kind of nitty-gritty details that Matt has to talk about regarding the infamous Game 6 of the 1986 World Series. But before we get into all those nitty gritty details, thought we'd touch a little bit on the World Series that just happened since the last time we met. The series concluded. There are only 5 games. Looked like the Dodgers may be on the brink of sweeping the Yankees, but then the Yankees were able to pull out at least one game. And And then it looked like the Yankees were maybe going to push it to a game 6, bring it back to LA. They seem to have a little bit of wind in their sails. And then they just got a swift kick in the nuts in the fifth inning of game 5, where so many terrible things happened, including something that just to kind of link the conversation here was maybe one of the most like what the hell sort of plays that I've ever seen in a, a big baseball game. I'll put it that way. Which after some fielding errors were getting the Yankees into trouble, Garrett Cole, as punchable a face as he has, I got to give him some credit. He he punched out 2 guys himself, uh, and was this close to getting out of a huge mess of an inning when he induced a ground ball, looking like he was going to get out of the inning, and he didn't run to cover first. He just kind of stood there
Yeah.
and watched Rizzo make the play, but he was too far away from the bag. He was waiting to throw it to his pitcher, who should have been there to cover first. And I seem to recall there being another infamous botch at first base in the 1986 World Series. Some guy named Buckner just completely whiffed on a ground ball. Uh, and I'm just curious, kind of giving it to you 2 guys, which play do you think was a worse, more boneheaded play between
So
those
let's
two?
add to that for a second
Mm,
that even though you pay attention to to Bill Buckner, the ball going through Bill Buckner's legs, Bob Stanley did not get over there in time enough to cover the bag.
mm,
Number one, just like Garrett Cole.
interesting. Already dropping some knowledge, some little details. What do you think, Greco?
Oh, I'll tell you what. So, um, I don't think you could have scripted a more fall apart kind of inning, right? And the interesting thing, I don't know if you guys saw this, was that part of the scouting report that the Dodgers had was just put the ball in play against the Yankees. Make them make the defensive plays. Because for as good as they are offensively, they're a little inept as far as the defense goes. And
A little
one of
bit.
those things that ended up biting them was um, Jazz um, Jazz Chisholm being over a third when that's not his natural position.
He's an
Right?
outfielder, right?
He's a usually outfield second base. The angle of the throw that Volpe threw to him, we're always taught as middle infielders that if you're going to miss the guy, you're going to make a bad throw. Just don't throw it high. Throw it on the ground, let him one hop it up. He threw a ball going to his right to get the guy out of third, and he had to make a quick throw, and he threw it on the ground, which is where you want it. If it's going to go anywhere, that's where you want
Mm.
I never would
it.
have
Jazz
thought of
didn't
that.
come up with it, right? He should have made a better throw, but Jazz should have had that ball, right? It hit his glove. He should have had that ball. Now, that being said, earlier in the game, there was a play going to first that Rizzo fielded, and he ended up calling off Cole going from the mound to first. Now, that ball was a similarly hit ball. The only difference, if you watch the replay, you're going to see that Rizzo comes charging in a little bit, and then he has to stop his feet and then turn and shift his body to the left. If you look at the larger picture of the replay, Cole starts going over to first and then sees the trajectory of the ball and shuts it down, right? He's done. He's like, oh, got out of this inning. I'm all set. And then he sees Rizzo have to turn his body and not make it back to the bag. Right. So that was on Cole. That was on Cole.
Rizzo was deeper too. He was playing deeper on that play, I feel like.
Yeah, he was, but he could have charged that one, and he started to. He started to
Mm.
charge it. And had he been able to keep his momentum going towards first base, having fielded it without having to stop his body and turn to backhand
Mm.
it, he probably would have made it there. So in Cole's defense, had that ball not kind of taken a little bit of a left turn if you're facing the outfield, going towards left field,
Mm.
he probably wouldn't have had to cover. Now, should he have given up on it? No, he shouldn't have. Right now, um, you know, the other plays there. I mean, having Judge take his eyes off the ball briefly, that
Yep.
happens. It
Yep.
sucks that it happened in the World Series, but that happens, right? A throwing error by the shortstop and somebody not be able to dig a ball out of the ground, that happens. Does it usually happen 3 times in one inning and lead to five runs being scored in the World Series? No, that doesn't usually happen.
You know what I
Um,
was taught to do to catch a ball in the outfield? Two hands.
Two hands.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I will
Two
tell you.
hands.
I will tell you that the way he was moving,
Mhm.
had I seen you as somebody who wants you to catch the ball, if you were running in with your hands on your glove like this, as opposed to one down by your side propelling you, I would have yelled at you.
You would have.
Yeah. I don't want you sitting here like this, running forward, trying to catch a ball. Right? I
I'm
want you like
surprised you didn't
this.
do it when we played softball.
What's that?
I'm
What's that?
surprised you didn't do it when we played softball. I did it then.
No, no. I would always tell you jerks to go back because y'all would step in. Ball's hit in the air and
Yes,
everybody's running into second
that's a
base.
huge problem for me.
Yeah, yeah. But I'll tell you what, when you're running in, you don't want to have your hands out front,
Yeah,
right? Because you're going to be off balance.
because it blocks your vision.
Yeah, yeah. You need to have one hand out and then secure it with the other hand, right?
Fair enough.
Get it in your glove and secure it. Don't worry about putting two hands now, right? Get in your glove. Now,
Uh,
the main question: which
Mm.
one was worse?
Mm.
86 was a hell of a lot worse.
So Quinn, I believe, used the question, and which is a more boneheaded play. Well,
86.
so I'll say this: when you say boneheaded, let's see who we factor in who's the most boneheaded. So all of this with the Yankees and the Dodgers is, knowing that everybody on there is healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And that has the physical capabilities to make that play.
Mm.
In the 86 World Series, we had somebody on the field that was not capable physically of making that play. And his manager put him out there despite that.
He's the bonehead.
And he had a healthy guy that he had put out there before in the series against the Angels as a defensive replacement. He just didn't do it in that game.
No, I'm
really,
sorry.
the bonehead is the manager.
Just to ask, is it true that he put Buckner out for like a little bit of respect to get him some playing time to say that he was able to play in the deciding game of the World Series?
That is what he says.
Uh,
That is what he says.
uh,
He also says that, and I was going to read this to you guys later, but he said that Dave Stapleton, who was the backup first baseman, people in the clubhouse called him shaky because he wasn't. They felt he couldn't handle a tense moment.
mm.
And every play, like Bruce Hurst and Dave Henderson, and I think Marty Barrett were there. I can't remember what it was. It was on MLB Network, and they all looked at him like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" Like, and let me tell you, that's just the tip of the iceberg with this game.
Interesting. So, so, so then, Greco, you're saying that the Buckner play was more boneheaded?
Yeah, and it wasn't Buckner's fault. I'm not saying that
Oh.
Buckner's the bonehead in this at
It's
all.
the manager that was the bonehead for
Yeah, and
having
I'm
him
not
in
even
there?
saying that Bob Stanley's the bonehead, and I'm saying that you know, if and it sounds like Tayl's skeptical on it. If the thought was, you know what, I'm gonna put the guy out there as a token because he deserves to play in the deciding game of the World Series because of his career, his tenure, and to be remembered for I get that. I get that. In hindsight's always 2020. And so, as unfair as this may be, that's the bonehead. The other stuff is baseball. I mean, we talked about Yogi Berra last week. 90% of the game is 50% mental. Listen, it is. It is. This is not an easy game. This is a hard game to play. And you know what? Those mistakes, a lot of it can be boiled down to mental. Majority of those things were not physical.
Yep. And having said that, when you make a mistake like that, not to put the best defensive player on the field you have, it's one thing to do it in a regular game. It's another thing to do it in a game where you have the chance to win your first World Series in 70 years.
Yeah.
So,
Or do like what other people do. And I can't say prior to this, but since I can remember, generally when we want to put a defensive replacement in, they go in towards the end of the game. We want
right.
to get the token guy who's the offense guy. That usually starts the game, right? And
Which
then we
Buckner was.
replace for defense, right? And
Yep.
so technically, maybe he should have started it. I don't know what the pitching matchups were to start the game. I don't know if it was just wasn't a favorable matchup for him or what it was. But, generally, you think about the guys coming in earlier. So I'm going to shut up. I'm going to let you do your thing, Mr. Taylor. I'm really curious to how you're going to lay this out.
Well, it's funny you say that because, with Buckner, because that is the reason he was in there. I was looking at his stats one day, and if I'm not mistaken, he had I think somewhere in the area of 2,900 hits.
Mm.
Let's see. He was close to 3,000 at 2,715. So I was a little off, but he had a good career. He won a batting title. He was a good offensive player. And when he was healthy, he was a good defensive player too.
How many years did he play?
I think like 19, maybe.
Yeah, it was close to 20. I knew that.
69 to 76, the Dodgers.
Mhm.
77 to 84, the Cubs. 84 to 87, the Red Sox. 87 to 88, Angels. 88 to 89, Royals. In 1990, he retired with the Red Sox.
So that's a 21-year career.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yep. Yep. One-time All-Star, batting champion, 1980, and he's in the Cubs Hall of Fame. So he was a good player, and he, yeah, I mean, he shouldn't have been out there. And there's so many things that happened before and after that that I didn't know until about 6-7 years ago, and then nobody had talked about it all. Like the first big thing is what started everything was Clemens coming out of the game in the seventh inning.
Mm.
So nobody still to this day, nobody knows why.
He was dealing. I was watching a highlight package of it just so I could kind of see like linearly like kind of what the flow of the game was without watching the whole like 3.5 hours, right? And
Yep.
because they kind of hit like all the kind of major plays and they showed a lot of his big strikeouts. And I mean, even the home plate umps being like some of his strikeout calls were like Enrico Palazzo making
Yeah.
fun of into it he was with like Clemens just he was friggin' dealing. He was no kidding them. What, through 6 innings or 5 innings, maybe?
Yeah, they got to him a little bit in like the sixth, I think, and then he pitched the seventh and then came out. And
Hmm.
rumor is he had thrown like I don't know 130 pitches, which back then that's what you did. Um, and I guess he had some kind of a blister on his
Hmm.
hand. And McNamara says he came down the steps to the dugout and said that's all I could pitch. Which, as much of a lion sack of shit as Clemens is, uh, I don't. I honestly don't see him doing that.
Hmm.
I could be wrong, but I believed McNamara first because Clemens is such a colossal liar. But then when he talked about Dave Stapleton, I'm like, in the way that his team talked about Dave, I'm like, this guy's a fucking liar too.
Hmm.
And he never said anything, like took any accountability for the bad decisions he made. So I guess Clemens was going out up to bat, had a helmet on going up to bat in the batter's box in the eighth inning,
Hmm.
and he called him back. Um, and they put my, and I think this is how it wound up. They put my second least favorite Red Sox out there to hit for him,
Hmm.
the Gator, Mike Greenwell. So he strikes out at 3 pitches.
All right, let me ask you a question. Okay,
Yeah,
so eighth inning,
yeah.
what's the scenario? Who's on base? What's the score? How many outs?
So the score is tied.
Hmm.
And it's before this. It's like the eighth inning. It's before the Henderson home run in the top of the 10th, I think.
It's
Uh,
3-3 at that point, I think.
yeah, yeah. Um, and they have Mike Greenwell. I think this is a scenario. I think they have Mike Greenwell pinch hit for Clemens, and they had Don Baylor on the bench.
Okay, how many outs? And who are they facing for a pitch?
One. I
One
think
out.
they're facing um, either Aguilera or maybe a Roscoe.
Okay, and nobody else is on base.
Not that I'm aware of.
In that situation, regardless, you'd probably pitch hit for a pitcher.
Well, yeah, you used Don Baylor, not Mike.
Hmm.
Well, um, so that there was that scenario. Um, yeah, I agree, Greco. You would. And then I'm trying to think. In the next inning, Marty Barrett singled, and then I think Henderson drove him in with a 2-run homer, and then they were up 5-3. So that's when it all came out. And then, so I think Schiraldi in the bottom of the 10th, got the first 2 outs in like 5 pitches. And so, after that, we got Keith Hernandez out. Keith Hernandez went back into the locker room thinking they were going to lose. So after the 5 pitches, I'm trying now. This is when it starts, right? So Gary Carter hits the first single.
Gary
Kevin
Carter. Now, wait a second. Gary Carter of the Blue Jays
the Mets,
later?
the Expos. You think of Expos?
Gary Carter.
Hall of Fame.
Gary Gary had a Hall of Fame career with the Expos and with the Mets. I mean, he was.
It was the
I think
Expos that
most
he was
people would
on.
forget that he actually played for the Expos.
Yeah.
I don't know if he ever any time outside of those two franchises though. Maybe
Oh.
the Dodgers at one point.
He finished with the Expos like in the early '90s, but
Yeah.
yeah, he was a Hall of Fame catcher. He died of brain cancer.
Yep.
In
Oh, wow.
2012. So he singles. Then there's a story like between like Kevin Mitchell came up, and I think Kevin Mitchell was a rookie at that time, and he had faced Calvin Schiraldi before, and there was some kind of discussion between Schiraldi and him, and he's like, Schiraldi said to him one time, he's like, I could get you out of my slider every time. And so he throws him a slider. Mitchell knew he was going to throw him a slider. Hits a single into left field. Now we got men on first and third. So now I'm trying to think. After that, the next, who's the third person hit us? Ray Knight. Ray Knight. Ray Knight hits a single. Let's see. Gary Carter scores. I think Mitchell goes to third. So then, then you have Mookie Wilson.
Mm.
So they pull Schiraldi. Bob Stanley comes in, throws. I'm going to give you guys a stat in a second here. I don't know how many pitches he started to throw to Mookie Wilson, but it was a lot.
Mm.
And then this is the one thing I don't know. Greco, maybe you know about this, but I don't know who fucked up. I don't know whether it was Rich Gedman or Bob Stanley, but then, Gedman threw a ball inside, or no, Stanley threw a ball inside to Mookie Wilson, and Gedman missed it going like this. It goes to the backstop, and it ties the game. Kevin Mitchell comes in to score. Now, that is the termination of the fact that the Red Sox had threw 16 pitches with a chance to win the World Series. 16 pitches where they were one strike away. Now, as it goes further, so Wilson fouls off like another 5 pitches. Then he hits it on the ground. It goes through Buckner's legs. So then they score their third run. Now, keep in mind, they score all 3 of these runs without the benefit of an extra base hit or a walk. 3 runs, 2 outs, no extra base hits, no walks for the championship. Or, basically for the championship.
Eventually, yeah.
Now, what I will add to this, I don't know because I never saw any interviews, but to me it looked like that Gedman got crossed up. He was expecting something else, and Stanley threw another pitch, right? Which in that scenario, you think about men on base, and if I do remember correctly, there was somebody at second, right?
I think Knight was at first. Maybe he went to second.
Okay, because a lot of times you think about, if they're changing up the sign sequence to make sure that they're not getting any signs stolen or anything like that, right? But the other piece of this, and I'm going to go back real quick, the bonehead thing, right? Both of these scenarios that we're talking about, 86 and then this year with the Yankees, right? You know, the Yankees gave up 5 runs without any of them being earned, but there was an extra base hit in there. There was some clean base hits, right? The impact of thinking that the Red Sox had 16 pitches to put this game away, and it wouldn't have been 86 years of misery. It would have been, quick math here, what, 68 years of misery
8 years.
had,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, that makes this more of a bonehead thing because of the history of it and how long it took afterwards for not only, and I know you're going to get into this too, Taylor, but not only um, for the Red Sox to actually win the championship, but for that poor man to be forgiven, right?
Mhm.
So that's my 2 cents so far. I'm going to shut up again.
So yeah, and they all focus on this one play, but like, there's so much drama to this day about other things. So after that game, and now this affects everything that happened in the next game. So I think they had a rainout for Game 7 because it was supposed to be the next day. So they gave that gave Bruce Hurst an extra day of rest, and he would have been the MVP had the Red Sox won.
Mm.
Even though it could have gone to a bunch of people like Marty Barrett or Dave Henderson or somebody like that. So
Not green one.
no, not Greenwell. No, not that time. Sorry, Gator. Um, so so the next game was 2 nights later. They pitched Bruce Hurst, and I think they went up 3-0 on a Dewey Evans home run, and then uh, like the Mets got to Hurst. I think in like the 5th inning, he just he'd run out of bullets. Um, and what we didn't talk about that is that the person who was supposed to start Game 7 was Oil Can Boyd,
Mm.
and he was supposed to come out of the bullpen for Hurst. But when he heard he wasn't starting, he tipped back a bottle of Jack Daniels and was too drunk to pitch.
Oh.
So there was that. Clemens was all supposed to be available out of the bullpen. McNamara never went to him. And he went to Schiraldi and Sambito and Stanley again. After they had exhausted all their bullets and had been hit over and over and over again. So, like, it just is the most colossal thing. And then Dwight Evans tells this story in Game 6, where I guess the sign behind in right field read "Congratulations, 1986 World Champion Boston Red Sox." He talked about that.
Oh, geez. That's a horrible jinx. This is reminding me of another thing that stood out to me. Like, I have more kind of general musings on just the footage that I watched of of a game from 38 years ago now. But it uh um it was really striking to see a giant Marlboro cigarette sign right over left center. It's just this giant I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
like there's just nothing even close to that anymore. Like you can
No.
barely even have an advertisement in like a magazine these days without having also
Yep.
so it was just like, oh, that's something.
So
There's all
that
kinds of stuff
reminds
that's
me.
popping in my head.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I'm sorry, and I don't mean to interject, but this is something that's popped in my head on everything we've talked about so far. I don't know if you ever, if you either of you did this, and I think they've shown it subsequently since, but um, the very first broadcast for the MLB network was Don Larson's Perfect Game, and they played that with the original commercials from the original broadcast.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh, cool.
And I will tell you that some of that stuff was a riot, and it was certainly dated. But
Yeah.
what, like, it was like a warm feeling of nostalgia, and it gave you respect for like what things were like back then, and to see like all the suits in the stadium, to see the hats, to see the way the game was played, and then to see like a little piece of Americana, how you know the Gillette commercials
Mm.
and
Yeah.
how they were at. It was just funny to see. It was just funny to see. So sorry that's literally popped in my head every time we podcast. That it felt like an interesting time to bring that up.
I love that stuff. I love that stuff.
Speaking of old-timey details of yesteryear, also you just referenced him, Oil Can Boyd. In my mind's eye, because I've heard that name plenty of times, because of the awesome nickname, I was picturing like, oh geez, he must be like, it's 1950s players or something, like one of the real old timers. Like, no, he was playing then, and I'm like, Oil Can, where did that come from? And so I had to look up where that nickname come from, and it looks like it just, I guess he explained that it's just when he was growing up, he used to put back beers really, really easily, and they called it oil. So,
Yep.
so it's fitting that he just went back to go have some drinks. I see where that's a fitting little anecdote.
Yep. He was managing the Brockton Rocks for a while.
Yeah,
Really?
I did know that, and he had a time with the Lowell Spinners
Yep.
for a bit
Ah,
as well. Yeah.
Yep.
So and Taylor, maybe you can clarify this. For some reason, I mean, Oil Can was I was a child, a mere child at the moment. Did he have a reputation for crying or something like that?
He was a loose cannon. I know that.
Okay.
Um, he was a troubled guy. I know
mm,
that. He, you know, he would argue with umpires when he was pitching and
Okay.
stuff like that. He was a loose cannon. He wasn't a great pitcher, but he wasn't. I think he won 16 games that year, something like that.
mm.
Respectable.
Yeah, I mean, they should have won Game 6. They didn't expect him to go to Game 7.
He is exactly a 500 pitcher. I just looked him up real quick. 78
Oh,
and 77, almost exactly 500 pitcher.
wow. Yeah, he was a character to say the least. Um, he lived in Chelsea. When
Oh.
there weren't great areas at Chelsea.
Mm.
So yeah, but when I think about all the stuff that happened, not just in that series, but the fact that they were there after that crazy game against the Angels where they hit the home run off at Donnie Moore, and 3 years later, Donnie Moore committed suicide, and all this other crazy shit. It's an incredible postseason year. If you look at the Mets Astros series, that series is unbelievable too. I think the deciding game in that series went 16 innings.
Right. I'll tell you, I do remember hearing a lot about that Angel series and the impact that it had.
Yep.
And wasn't it him and Dom Baylor were buddies?
Yeah,
Right.
Baylor homered off him at the top in the beginning of the inning.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what did it. I mean, that was pretty much. And I know Baylor talked about how he kind of lived with that. Because it
If
was a
you look
friend
at
of
the two home runs that they hit, right, that Baylor and Henderson hit, there were pitches that were off the plate. And this isn't a situation where, Schiraldi throws him a slider right over the middle of the plate. Like, he threw a pitch to Henderson that had to be at least 6 inches off the plate. And Baylor hit a ball like down off the outside corner, and it flew out. So it's not like he made a terrible pitch.
This is leading me to another observation, is how refreshing it was. And I get how, anything done to an extreme where if it was always this way, it might get a little monotonous after a while. But guys going up the plate just looking to put the bat on the ball and
Mm-hmm.
not just trying to focus on launch angle
Yeah.
and crush it into the seats. Like every single batter was up there looking to just slap the ball into where the fielders weren't. Like
Yeah.
just get the ball in play and see what happens. And it like you can see, even though I was obviously watching a highlight package, you can see how that like would just give the game a little more pace, like a little more like because the ball's always getting into play instead of just either being walked, strikeout, or a bomb. And the bombs can be fun, but it still kind of limits the action because then they're just trotting around the bases. So it was just cool to see these guys just like keep swatting it into the outfield.
You mean in the
I do
Dodgers
miss that part
this
of the
year
game.
series or
No, in
in
this game
'86?
six, yeah. In '86, they were just getting the ball in play.
I'd even argue even the early 2000s.
Mm,
Guys were you'd see them take the Jason Kendall approach or the Joey Votto approach and choke up with two strikes, right?
mhm.
And just work the count to get it in their favor and take a ball they can hit and hit it, right? The art of hitting now is I couldn't agree with you more. And it does. I think it does hurt the game.
Yep. And you know, McNamara did so many things right that year.
Mm.
But wow, did he? You know, it's the perfect example of how maybe a manager can't win your World Series, but they can certainly lose you one. Um, you know, and it was shocking, shocking.
I saw a quick glance at him in the footage that I saw. He was kind of like a gray-haired
Hmm.
dude.
Yep.
Just just immediately called to mind Grady Little. just just this just this gray-haired chucklehead who's making these poor decisions that are sabotaging the team and losing his job. Did he lose his job? Like, was he fired at the end of that season?
No,
Really?
he won. They were below 500 the next year, and then he was fired in the middle of the '88 season, where they brought Joe Morgan in. This
Oh,
not
Morgan Magic.
yes, yep.
I
Uh,
remember McNamara because of my old baseball cards.
yes, he managed the
That's why.
Reds.
Yeah, that's why I remember him. Yeah.
Yeah, he had a successful career as a manager overall, but wow, is he unaccountable? Holy shit, is he unaccountable?
I'll tell you what. You can sit here, and I guess this is my and I appreciate you talking about this as holistically as you do. There's a lot of thought about like football being like the ultimate team sport, right? And in some cases, it certainly is very much a team sport. I don't think there's enough emphasis because you usually focus on one player at a time for baseball, right?
Mm-hmm.
One pitcher throwing the ball, you have one bitter batter trying to hit it, right? You have one fielder trying to field it and then throw it, and then another one trying to catch it, right? So for that most part, but I'll tell you what, it is such a team sport because everything that player does in front of you affects the person behind them. Everybody that's sitting behind them affects the player in front of them. And just hearing you talk about how something as stupid as Boyd getting pissy and getting trashed in the locker room,
Yep,
and how that impacted the whole series.
yep.
How one person getting on base and working a pitch count can
Mm-hmm.
affect who the other guys are going to be throwing now, right? I mean, it's just it really is it's refreshing to hear you talk about the impact that the team had as opposed to something that I always thought of for Red Sox fans and how they looked at it was always fucking Buckner. And it never sat that way with me because, granted, I didn't pay as much attention to that whole series. And certainly, I think it was later on in my baseball watching career that I actually learned as much as you just told me about it. I grew up thinking that Buckner was the one who screwed it up, but it always seemed like there was a lot more to it once you
They do
heard
what's easy. They blame the easy target, and you know the game was already out of hand at that point. Even when the ball went through his legs, the game was already out of hand.
Hmm.
Ball had gotten by Gedman. The game was tied. Knight was on second base. And Stanley failed to go over and cover. And even if he got there, Mookie Wilson was saying that he may not have gotten there in time. Now the
Shea
question
Stadium was
is,
going nuts at that
yeah.
point too.
So then the
Going
question
nuts.
is, would Knight have scored from second? Who knows? I don't know. But uh, it's I've never seen a failure like it. Never.
There was a pretty glaring too earlier in the game. There was a pretty glaring uh um outfield assist that got Jim Rice out at the home plate
Yeah.
earlier in the game. That was just
Yep.
kind of like, oh boy, like if you really want to start doing second guesses or from earlier in the game, the third base coach, it's
Yep.
like Jim Rice. eh, Not that I studied his base stealing prowess or his speed, but he never struck me as being a fleet of foot guy, right?
Oh,
So why would you take that chance? Maybe hold him up like as I was watching, I was like, they don't send him, do they? And I'm like, what are they doing?
yeah.
Like he's getting thrown out.
Yep.
And it just really felt like the tightness was definitely there, as often is for the Sox, or was at least big games.
It was a failure before, during, and after the
Mm.
game. Like, and I've never seen anything like it. I've never
Well,
seen
and
anything.
this is making me. It's kind of distilling something for me um, about the difference between football and baseball. I feel like as it relates to being a team sport, football, I feel as though is a little more physically interdependent. Like there's so much stuff that has to go on at the same time, particularly with the line on each side of the ball in order for things to work right. Like you need to be able to depend on your other teammates like physically to like get shit done.
Yep.
But baseball, for as much as it's like kind of a spotlight on just kind of singular players in your positions, it might be the most psychologically interdependent sport of the bunch, where I feel like the meltdown factor becomes way more drastic when one thing starts to crumble with one guy.
Yep.
Like it spreads like wildfire. I feel like on baseball teams more than with other sports where it can just really. I mean, you saw it in the fifth inning of the Yankees game where the Yankees they had momentum. It really did feel like it was like, yeah, they're going to push this to game six, and it was just amazing how much it just was a complete and utter meltdown,
Yeah. It's
and
ridiculous.
and just really feels like baseball. There's a lot more psychological interdependence, which I'm sure Greco can maybe speak.
Well, I'll say one thing,
Mm.
in terms of like why I think baseball is special. It's because football, hockey, and basketball aren't like this. In hockey, you could put your three lines out when you're in a Stanley Cup game in overtime. You top three lines. In basketball, you can throw the ball to your best player. Football, you put your starters in there. Baseball, you can't do that. You have to put in who's ever in the lineup, whoever's on your bench, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why you see ordinary players in extraordinary situations, like
No,
Mookie Wilson.
100%. 100%. And I do think that, thinking about like, particularly, I think it's under a microscope when you think about like basketball. If you could have a team built with three all stars and pretty much nobody else, and you're gonna run that league. I mean, it really is. We just had an election, and a lot of it was about identity politics. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like basketball is identity basketball because
Mm-hmm.
you have certain people that are considered to be the best. That's what you need. You can lose some really good players, Mike Trout, on some really bad teams and make people think that he sucks and that he's overrated
Yeah,
because that's not going to shine through. You have to have the surrounding cast. And there's more variables that are happening at the same time, right? Um, Football, you get the opportunity to play one way for the most part. Rarely do we see two-way players now.
yeah,
Baseball, you have to be both,
Yep.
right? You have to be both, with the exception of somebody who's a DH,
Yep.
right? You have to be both. And I get it, and I think it's special. Again, I don't think he's Hall of Fame, but I think it's special. The fact that Shohei can pitch and hit, but nobody's sitting here saying, "Wow, you know what? Gold Glove outfield," right?
Mm.
And I'll tell you what, I think it's more impressive when you have a guy who can be a fantastic catcher and amazing hitter, because that is more demanding defensively
Yep.
than pitching is. But you know what? You you have both. You have to be able to do both. Unless you're a specialist, you have to be able to do both. And I mean, if I sit here and I take a pitcher deep in a count and I let my batters behind me see the breaks, maybe notice a pattern, notice something he's doing with his glove, maybe even just work the count where he's starting to get tired now, right? Or force him to pay attention to me on the bases. That may give my batter more of an opportunity to get a favorable pitch, something to drive or something to hit. If I don't know the tendencies of my pitcher as a middle infielder and I'm not moving with the pitch and trying to get myself in a good position, that could be the game,
Yep.
right? These are all things that a lot of folks I don't think really see because they're looking for the long ball, right? They're looking at the Yankees and saying, you know what? What a great lineup. They have a fantastic lineup. But I'll tell you what, defense is still what wins you championships,
Yeah.
Mm.
right?
Absolutely.
Um,
Well, pitching is defense.
it is.
Hmm.
It is. It is. And I'll tell you what, a lot of times, you talk about you never saw a coach necessarily win it. Well, you didn't say never, right? You don't think, this question whether or not a coach can win you a championship, right? Or a manager can win you a championship, but they can certainly lose you one. I would argue that a good manager, you don't even know they exist,
Hmm.
right? Because you're not bitching about the calls they didn't make. It's like a good umpire,
Yep.
right? You know, you don't really know they're there until they fuck up,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
It's all one cohesive unit. And I will tell you that managers can change a team.
And there are managers that, well, Tommy Lasorda did that. Sparky Anderson did that. Um, to an extent, Jim Leland did that.
I
Uh,
think Francona did that for you guys.
Yeah. Francona
Francona
was
was the
great.
right guy for that squad of
yes,
players.
I
Hmm.
agree.
Hmm.
Yep. I was never a huge fan of his, but yes, I do think he was the right guy for that team. Yes.
Yeah.
I got to go make sure somebody's in bed here. I'll be right back.
All right.
Hmm.
All right. Rolo,
Yeah.
Mr. T is going to take a sabbatical. Would you like to continue this discussion or should we do a commercial break?
We can continue this discussion because I have a few other kind of observations I think you can speak to. One of which is batting stances. So I don't. So like I'm just curious about sort of the evolution of batting stances. Nearly every single player that I kept seeing come up to plate in that game has the same batting stance of just kind of sticking their butt out and kind of hanging their like kind of torso sort of just over the plate, kind of bending at like kind of like kind of like a half bend over the plate, but just kind of like just sort of like waiting there for the and I don't know if it's just like an unfussy sort of batting stance because they're looking for unfussy results. I'm just trying to slap the ball into the outfield, but like uh, it like nowadays I just feel like there's all sorts of wacky batting stances and getting rid of the batter's box rituals and all these things. Whereas back then, it's just kind of like guys just kind of stood there, stick their butt out, and maybe their feet are at slightly different kind of spacing
Yeah.
and just get ready for the pitch.
Yeah. I think there's a couple things to that. I think there's a couple things. I think one is, um, and I can't really speak to it too much, but I think that back in the day, there was kind of like a standard, right? Where
Mm,
this is what a hitter looks like. This is what we teach you, right?
Mhm.
I think that the more influence that um, kids had and access to watching games on TV and seeing some of the intricacies and getting to know some of the players, that kind of started to open up styles in the way people hit, right? Um,
mm,
I also think that the evolution of the pitcher was a huge part of this, right?
mm,
You had guys, that back in the day, what was Clemens touching in the 80s? What, 93, 94 maybe,
Mhm.
right? Busting it. And he was one of the
mm,
hardest pitchers that you had. I
Yeah.
mean, think
mm,
about even the early 2000s. Somebody was banging it in at 95, 96. You're like, oh, wow, this is amazing. We
mm.
have guys throwing 105 now,
Yeah.
right? And if they're not breaking, 98, we're like, well, not that good.
Mm,
So as a hitter, you have to evolve. And you may see guys who change the smallest little things in their swings from the beginning of the season to the end of the season, or it may be something drastic where all of a sudden they used to have this big leg kick, and now all of a sudden that timing mechanism's not working anymore because they're behind. They're behind these guys who are throwing 105, and so now it's just a little toe tap, right? Um, there's a number of different things that I think has changed the game and how hitters have to, react. I know that the large emphasis on taller pitchers has changed how the ball is seen, right?
mm.
So now that lanky kind of angle where the ball actually spends less time in the strike zone because of the trajectory of it going through the strike zone because of the height of the pitchers and where it's released actually has forced guys to kind of change how they've approached their swing path. Um,
Mm.
you're talking about, how the game has changed and evolved. Well, guys who are now just swinging for the fences, they're not thinking about having enough control in order to just put the bat on the ball now. And so some of what you said, I think, is right. Just being able to get the bat in the hitting position and keep it in the strike zone as long as possible is something that maybe they were thinking about back then. Now they're just thinking about how can I create as much torque as possible? How can I coil my body up as much as
Right.
possible to try to get that optimal trajectory to knock the thing out of the park, right? That's
Mm.
what
You
we're thinking
say,
about now.
sorry, I didn't interrupt, but like,
No,
would you
no.
say like a batter like that exists today that might have been the batter you're looking for back then is a Rise, the guy from San Diego that's won 3 batting
Oh,
titles,
yeah, yeah,
three
yeah.
different teams.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Luis is probably one of the more pure hitters we have right now.
Yeah.
I think about a guy like Votto.
Mm.
I'll tell you that I don't think Votto is looking for a job in the 80s or the 90s or even the early 2000s. I think that people are begging him to come and put the bat on the ball, right? Um, these are the guys that I think um, are those prototypical hitters. Those are the guys that I like to watch, right? Um, you know, the I think the poppies of the world and their success, um, not just at the plate, but their popularity in the
Mm.
game
Yeah.
and their marketability has helped to change some of that, right?
Yeah.
You know, Poppy was considered one of the best players, but aside from a few years, he really wasn't hitting for average. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. That's true.
First player in Major League history to win 3 batting titles with 3 different teams. A Rise.
Rise. Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Amazing.
Minnesota,
Miami
Marlins.
and Padres.
Yeah, where he just went. Yep.
Damn.
Why would they give him away? Or
Marlins.
yeah, I mean, I get Well, Minnesota, I think, got some good pitching in
They
return.
did. Yeah. No, that was a good trade for Minnesota, and they also have, they have some pretty significant players right there, and so as much as we wouldn't necessarily think he's expendable, he certainly helped them with that trade.
Mm.
I gotta say too, just looking at the footage too, I know you hate his guts and he's an insufferable jackass, but man, like watching Clemens pitch, you can just see he's different.
That dude
He
was
was
filthy.
like just to see him compared to the freaking ham and eggers that would come out in relief.
Yeah,
like like just the ball came out of his hand differently,
yeah,
and he was just a freaking moose, like just the power he put behind the
yeah,
fastball, and it just like it looked like it didn't take as long to get to the plate. Like it looked like it was on a line almost, just the way he threw it. And then that just made any curveball or changer, which he clearly didn't throw very often, at least not in those days.
He had a
Just
split.
seemed
yeah.
that's right.
In a
That's right.
forkball,
That's
yeah,
right. It's split. It just felt like back then, though, in his really younger years, he was just pumping in fastballs and just the location of it. And it's just amazing how if you got an electric fastball that's well located, you don't need much else.
It
yeah.
was late life.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
I'll have to find this. I wrote a letter to the editor of the New York Post, and it got in there. It got published because he was calling him like the best. They were saying he was the best pitcher of all time. I'm like, oh yeah, look at this shit. Look at his failure in this playoff game. Look at his failure in this playoff game. Look at his failure here. Look at his failure here, here, and here.
That's great. I'd love to read that. It's definitely one of those things though uh that just stood out like eyeball test wise, like just kind of seeing the way the ball came out of his hand, just being
Yeah.
like, oh geez, man, he was something to watch.
I would imagine one year. I don't have his stats up, but I would imagine he probably pitched 250 to 300 innings at least once.
Well, he was like 24-4 that year,
Yeah,
and I'm like, holy shit.
yeah, yep,
Like guys just having that many wins just highlights how much more games guys would pitch, and then how much later in the games they would pitch where they would qualify for wins. Unlike the freaking ninnies today who are just completely have been castrated by the nerds running the sport. Stupid freaking nerds.
I'll tell you what, Clemens, and I'm just gonna ignore the stupid nerds thing again because you guys won a World Series off the back of nerds.
yep.
Uh, So I'll tell you what, Clemens always reminded me, despite his um, later transgressions with steroids or whatever it is, as kind of like the last kind of cowboy kind of pitcher, the Nolan Ryan type, and I know I made a comparison to him and Ryan back in the day, and how my mother would talk about how they trained similarly with the bucket of rice and all that stuff. But I always felt like he was the kind of guy that you put him on the mound and he's just gonna try to shoot you out, right?
Beckett
He,
Beckett had a little bit of that a few of his years.
but he didn't have that intimidating kind of. I'm just gonna gas it by you. Beckett was more finesse in some ways, right? Clemens made me feel like he was just gonna muscle it through you,
Mm,
right? Maybe a little Randy Johnson,
mm,
right? In that where it was like, all right, guess what? They call me the big unit, and I'm just gonna plow you, right?
mm,
I mean, but Clemens had that good old boy kind of big Texas. I'm just gonna stand on the mound. If you can hit it, good for you, right?
mm.
Yeah. He turned into an asshole later, but I'll tell you what, that man could deal.
Mm.
He
Well,
could.
he 1986 he pitched 254 innings. The next year he won the Cy Young again in 87 he pitched 281 in 2/3 innings. Um, that's a lot of innings.
Yikes.
So, Mr. Taylor, when did and why did um, Mr. Clemens get your ire?
Mm.
Oh, where to begin?
Yeah,
Uh,
please begin because I'm really curious.
well,
You've this is another like revolving theme. I want to know why.
so he he's an asshole. He always has been, and
Okay.
he there are stories about him. Uh, I guess like making everybody else carry his bags literally through the airport, like stuff like that. There are stories of him berating like umpires and like other kids' coaches at his kids' games. There's stories of that. Um, and I, you know, at the end of his time with the Red Sox, he was not the same pitcher. He just wasn't. And they bitched about him. He bitched about the fact that Dan Duquette let him go and got rid of him and all this stuff. But he hadn't pitched
Twilight of
well.
his career, right?
Yeah, like he had not pitched well. And if you look at, um, if you look at that game, this is another thing I forgot. So when he started that game, not only did you have the drama of that game, but starting with that game, the Red Sox lost 13 consecutive postseason games. They lost the final two games of that series. They got swept twice by guess who? The Oakland A's in the American League Championship Series, and then they got swept by the Indians in '95. On I don't know if you guys remember that Tony Pena home run that they hit in Game 1. So they lost 13 consecutive games and 16 of 17, and the only win was when Pedro Martinez came here, and so everybody thought he's the greatest pitcher of all time, and he's a winner, and he's not. And he climbed the back of the Yankees to win his first championship. Um, and he kind of the Red Sox didn't really win until Pedro Martinez got here. That was the change of everything. That was the change of the Red Sox building their team around pitching.
Mm-hmm.
So why do I hate Clemens? Because he sucks and he wasn't at his best when it mattered most. I hate Kurt Schilling too, but Kurt Schilling was at his best when it mattered most.
Mm-hmm.
So Clemens' contributions to those were, and I'm just questioning.
Mm-hmm.
I'm playing a little devil's advocate.
Yep.
Clemens' contribution to the Yankees World Series teams.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't help them win the championship at all. I mean, we were talking about this being a team sport, right?
Of course he did.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, he got there in '99.
Yeah.
The best team I've ever seen for an entire season is the '98 Yankees.
Yeah.
Which he wasn't on.
Yeah.
They won 125 games.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think they would have won without him. And then, of course, the signature moment of his career, throwing the bat at Mike Piazza.
Oh yeah. No, that was such a douchebag move.
I didn't even know what to say about that.
That was awful. Yeah, that was awful.
It was so shocking even for him.
Well, and what a piss poor excuse as to why he did it.
Oh, I thought it was a ball.
Yeah. So I guess my question for you is, all right, so the '98 team won a while, and I'm not trying to challenge you. I'm just curious.
Yeah,
The '99 team he jumped on,
mm-hmm.
Would he have won more? Would the Yankees have won more without him on that team?
You mean more world championships, mean?
No. So you'd mentioned how the '98 team won the most games, right? That was one of the best teams you ever saw. He jumped on the '99 team.
Yep.
Did he hurt them? Did he make them a worse team?
Oh, okay. No, I wouldn't say so.
Okay.
No.
But there is something to be said for helicoptering in on an already wagon of a team and vulturing some of the wins, some of the titles off of being on that team that was already pretty damn good.
You mean
Um,
Kevin Durant syndrome?
yes, like Kevin Durant did with the Warriors. And also, if you want to even just keep it in baseball, another Hall of Fame member of the Asshole Hall of Fame, Wade Boggs, did the same thing, jumping onto the Yankees
Yep.
to get a title.
Yep.
Uh,
And
Whoa,
he's an
whoa, whoa,
asshole.
whoa. Wait. I'm sorry. Hold on. Okay. Let me
member of the Asshole Hall of Fame, Greco.
listen. I don't like any of them, and I don't like the Yankees. Okay, and I certainly don't like the '90s Yankees and the early 2000s Yankees. Nor do I like the early 2000s Red Sox because you guys fucked my team over. But I'll tell you what, to say that um, two, and we had this argument before, potential Hall of Famers, right? Bod certainly, right? A Hall of Famer. Didn't contribute, just rode the coattails of a team that was better. I mean,
Oh,
what do you
yeah.
You
who did he replace?
misunderstand. You
Yes.
misunderstand, Greco.
Yeah.
I have, let's put it this way. I have less respect for a player that even someone like Schilling, you could make the argument that he did go on to a wagon of a team with the Red Sox, but the Red Sox still hadn't won anything yet. And not only did he help get them over the hump, but he risked ending his career with experimental procedure on his ankle and then pitched lights out in a critical game 6 and then pitched a really solid game 2 in the World Series to get us to our first World Series in 86 years versus the Yankees having already won 2 titles.
Yeah.
Well, 2 titles before Clemens got there. I forget what the timeline is for when Boggs got there. Um, but both Boggs and Clemens had already arguably had their best years already. Boggs certainly had.
Yeah.
And they were just like, got to get our title somehow. And instead of like instead of actually being the centerpieces around, in on a team that they were instrumental in getting the title, or like that they played instrumental roles in in helping an organization get uh, a title. There's a difference between what something like Clemens did, or like what not Clemens, like what Schilling did, or like what certainly like someone like Jordan did, obviously in something like the NBA, where he toiled for years with the Bulls throughout the 80s, getting beat up by the Celtics, getting beat up by the Pistons, and then finally breaking through in the 90s and becoming the greatest player of all time, bringing 6 titles to Chicago. And
Not in my view. That's a whole other thing.
oh, Matt's got some sneaky contrarian takes going on here.
Most
Like,
hated athlete, number two.
oh,
Okay.
well,
I won't get
like
into that in this podcast, but
likability is
um,
another whole factor here. But
yeah,
but Kevin Durant, I think, is one of the most clear examples of he technically won. I think that the MVPs of
yeah, he did.
those series
Yep,
with the Warriors. He's a great player.
yep.
So even if Clemens was
Okay.
playing well, and if Boggs played well, it just feels cheaper what they
I,
did.
I'll tell you what. Hold on. I'm sorry. I let you ramble a little bit, waiting to see if you actually made some sense. And now you're talking about a basketball game where we already talked about if somebody's special, they can change the whole freaking thing. You're gonna tell me that in the honestly, and I if you tell me the contrary, I'm not gonna believe you anyway. But Had Boggs or Clemens, and maybe not for you, Taylor, but just curiosity, Rolo, because you're the one who's, kind of pushing this narrative a little bit more. Had Boggs or Clemens gone to say team like the Kansas City Royals, and the Kansas City Royals were on a bit of a run, had a similar dynasty to the Yankees, and weren't the damn Yankees who shave their faces and look funny. Um, that you would be saying the same thing you would be saying now about Boggs and his career and how he rode the coattails of a dynasty to a championship.
I
He
can tell
would.
you the difference between. Sorry, Quinn. I can tell you the
No,
difference
please.
between Schilling and Clemens.
Oh, I can too. Yeah, that was another thing I was going to get to. Go ahead. You're probably going to say
Um,
exactly what I said.
I would say uh, for the 2004 team, you could argue, in my opinion, you could argue the three players that are the most important players on that team: Big Poppy,
Mm-hmm.
Kurt Schilling, or Keith Folk are the most important for me.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I guess you could say Manny too, but for me, to be a closer on that team,
Mm.
to be able to handle the closer record, to handle the closer role on a team that's had 86 years of failure and the type of failure they've had in 86 years, and you being on the mound at the end of the game, I don't know how Keith Folk didn't have a big brown spot on the back of his uniform. And
Seriously.
then, you know, but to me, Schilling was arguably the most important part of that team. As much as I hate the guy, that's what it was. He put us over the top.
Right. Well, and I'll tell you what. Here's the other thing I was going to bring about Schilling. Schilling already proved himself
Right.
as a winning pitcher.
Yep.
Arizona,
Yep.
Yep.
Philadelphia.
Yep.
He won with them. He
Yep.
didn't need the Red Sox to or jump on their
True.
coattail, win a championship.
Yep.
That wasn't happening with that. They brought him in because of his pedigree and his
Mm-hmm.
championship ways.
Yep.
And I will tell you that Wade Boggs was on some winning teams.
Yep.
What happened is everything we've been talking about the Red Sox and their bungling of some championship caliber teams. And Clemens was a part of those too.
Mm.
Clemens was a winning pitcher and helped win some championships on some other teams. You don't get to be, how many times did he win a Cy Young Award?
4, I think.
I think he won like 7, actually.
Yeah.
7.
You don't get to
What?
be a Cy Young winner.
Yeah.
And legitimately, I don't think you could argue that he shouldn't have won those. I think he earned every single one, whether you like him or not.
Yeah.
He earned those. This guy on the right team is a contributor to a championship.
Absolutely.
And I will tell you that he didn't ride any coattails to get there and win, right? Those teams may have been good already, but he helped them get better. And I will also tell you that we just said it. Baseball is not going to be won by one star player, but it can be lost by many, right? You saying that Boggs didn't contribute and just rode the coattails to a championship at the end of his career where he hit 3,000 hits. And he actually had a pretty decent end of his career with Tampa, too, by the way.
It
Listen,
was it was like the equivalent of a lifetime achievement award for the Oscars, right? Like she's like, okay, here's your World Series title, Boggs. You had a nice career. Good for you.
He
Boston
told us
fans,
to jump off the Tobin Bridge.
dude,
Remember that
Boston
comment?
fans are assholes. This is why Buckner was ostracized
Wade
until
Boggs was a
2004.
dick bag. Wade Boggs was a dick bag.
Yeah.
What did he do to you?
He was a terrible teammate.
How?
A terrible, terrible teammate.
What did he
I've
do?
heard that too.
Uh,
He ate chicken
I,
before every game. What else did he do?
I will find the
I want to
anecdotes
hear
for
it.
you.
I want to hear it. I want to hear it. And you know what? So was Bonds,
Yes.
right? So was um,
Actually, Jeff Kent too, I heard.
Jeff Kent was an ass. Yeah, right. But you're ready to put one of them in the Hall of Fame because fuck steroids.
Yeah, I'd be ready to put both of them in, Bonds and Clemens.
I want to hear why Boz was such a bad teammate, but was able to play for 20 something years, and why he didn't
Oh,
deserve a World Series with the Yankees. I want to hear this.
Boggs was a hell of a hitter. I think he has one of the highest
I'm asking
lifetime
you why.
averages
Yeah, and he
of
never swung
all
at the first
time.
pitch. I know that. Why was he such a bad teammate and didn't deserve a World Series and just rode the coattails of somebody else? Lifetime
I'm
Achievement
saying
Award. I want to hear why.
I'm saying that I have less respect for him being considered a World Series champion
Why?
because I think he played a less important role on winning that championship.
Did he play a lot of games for the Yankees?
That's a good question. I have to look up and see
Yeah, check it
what
out.
his games play were that season.
Let's see.
I want you to check it
Yeah.
out. I want you to tell me what his batting average was. I want you to tell me how many errors he made at third base.
Uh,
I'm not going to look this up. I'm going to let you do it.
had four
I
straight
can't.
300 plus seasons and won two Gold Gloves. Wow.
Yeah, he didn't contribute anything. He was awful.
Let's see.
It was the twilight of his career.
Marco Adams. I remember that. Let's see.
This is why Red Sox fans short-sighted dickbags. Because if you go and play for the Yankees, all of a sudden you suck and you didn't deserve anything.
Let's see.
You're a girlfriend who got dumped.
Yeah.
Prom. You're never gonna live it down. You're always gonna hate him.
Yeah,
Hey,
I always remember him telling
I'll
us to jump off the
I'll
floating
have to
bridge.
punt. I'll have to punt until next episode because
you
I
can't find
know I've
anything.
heard these anecdotes. No,
Yeah,
can't find anything right
can't find
now,
anything. Yeah.
but I
Uh,
will. I promise you that.
okay, great.
Or I'll continue to take my lumps. I
I'll
just
I'll tell you
I
what.
just I just find Wade Boggs to be someone who was all about getting his stats and not about helping the team.
Wait. So how did that hurt the team if the guy hit 300?
Situationally, there may have been
A better
some
time to
at
strike
bats.
out, maybe?
There may have been some at bats where he could have taken a different approach that might have been better for the team
Oh,
than
okay.
for his own stats.
Like what?
I'm not. I'm gonna have to look that up too.
You're talking about a guy who notoriously never swung at the first pitch, no matter how good it was. Notoriously never swung at the first pitch,
Let's see.
but was one of the best hitters for almost 2 decades.
He's a great hitter. Great
So
hitter.
why would you
Three
say?
28 lifetime average, right?
So why would you say that he's swinging for personal stats as opposed to help the team? We just talked about how batting average is something that we all think would have been or should be something that is considered to be important, something that should be revered still.
So So I think that there could be an argument that he may have suffered a little bit from Ichiro syndrome, which you're probably going to jump down my throat for as well. But Ichiro's another one that we have talked about before,
Who could
who
hit for power.
who chose not to because he really wanted to just keep that average up.
Do you think that the Ichiro did that because he was selfishly chasing stats? Or do you think that he did that to help his team because his role in the team was to be the table setter and get on base for the people
I
behind him?
think I think in some of the seasons when he was the best player on the team may have been better served with him hitting more dingers. And I think the same probably could have been said for Boggs during some of his seasons as well.
So, okay. Okay. Maybe the manager said, "Hey, listen, Ichiro, I want you to load up and start swinging for the fences," and instead of being the table setter, and he said, "No, I don't want to do that. No, thank you." And he just decided not to. But I would say that, and the reason why I'm saying this is I don't know if that's the case, but I would argue that chances are he had the skill sets that other people didn't have, and they wanted him to use those skill sets and be the guy to get on base and be the guy to set up and cause havoc on the bases and let the Jay Buners, the
Mm.
Edgar Martinez, the um, Richie Sextons that had the pop
Oh,
and the bat,
Richie Sexton, I remember him.
yeah, that
That guy
had
was
the pop
huge.
and the bat and necessarily weren't going to be a high percentage batting average kind of guy
Mm.
and put pressure on the defense and the pitcher to give them guys something to hit and put the ball into the stands. Because you know what? His ability as a leadoff hitter wasn't that. He fit the role. And I would argue that Boggs did the same thing. Boggs, if I remember correctly, was not a number 4 or 5 hitter, nor was he a number 3 hitter. Maybe number 2, but for the most part, I'm pretty sure he was a pretty decent leadoff hitter for most of his career.
So I'll be Quinn's advocate for a second. So I was looking at his postseason stats, um, and they're not awful, but
Okay.
they're not great.
Okay.
Um, I think. Well, the reason I look at Clemens differently, I don't like Wade Boggs either, but uh, I don't have any close feelings of Wade Boggs to
I
Roger
hate
Clemens.
them both. Just
Yeah,
so you
I
know,
don't too.
I
Um,
personally, they fucked my team twice because they played for the Red Sox and the Yankees.
yes,
So I don't
but
like them.
you know, I just remembered something
Mm.
um, from. Well, I used to call him douchebag fuckface, but like if you remember in the fourth game of that 1990 series with the A's, uh, Clemens blew a gasket and yelled that I think Terry Cooney was one of the umpires
Mm-hmm.
at the time,
Yep.
exploded and got thrown out of a game. He
Yep.
got
He
thrown
did.
out of a game
Yep.
in the
In the
playoffs
in the championships. Yeah. Yep. Okay.
because that doesn't hurt your team.
So when you advocating for Quentin,
I would say Boggs had a reputation. Maybe it was unfair. I don't know.
well, I don't. Yeah. Okay. But did that cause him not to win championships?
With the Red Sox,
I don't know.
um,
Is that why he went to the Yankees and had success in getting rings? Because he was an asshole with the Red Sox, and but he was really nice with the Yankees. Is that what it was?
You're drawing lines that I didn't put
yeah,
out there, Greco. They're
yeah,
two separate things. He's an asshole, which is independent
Okay.
of him being a
yes,
good player. He was a good hitter,
But you
but
brought up that he was a bad teammate
yeah,
as
yeah,
part of
I
the
think he
reason.
was. I think
Okay.
he was from
But so that's what I'm talking
and
about.
who knows? It's quite possible that any of the stories that I've heard over the years have been apocryphal, like
I
him
am
being a racist or him get. It's funny because two of the people that, in a quick cursory glance of just things that I can find, two of the people that have called him out as being like, not being his biggest fan are Oil Can Boyd and Roger Clemens.
I'll tell you
So,
what.
so,
Listen,
so then you start considering
that's
the sources a little
hilarious.
bit.
yeah. I guess my question to you is the same thing that I posed with Rose, right? And I'm trying to be consistent here too. Pete Rose, for the most part, was an ass. And, I wasn't even alive when he knocked out Ray Fosse. But just by virtue of the fact that this dude was the color commentator, one of my favorite of all time for my team, I hated Rose for that, right? But I'll tell you what, that doesn't mean he wasn't a good player and that he didn't contribute to some World Series winning teams. My argument is you're telling me that Wade Boggs rode the coattails of some really good teams. And the same with Clemens, because he didn't play in that 98 team, but he played in that 99 team, which wasn't as good. And they would have won without him. I'm asking for some sort of like, why do you say that other than the fact that you don't like the guys? Other than personal problems with the guys, how do they not contribute and how do they not earn a world championship?
I think Clemens did contribute to those teams.
Oh,
And Boggs left the Red Sox, I think, in '93, and the
Mm.
Yankees won their first World Series in '96,
yeah.
Mhm.
in first in 18 years. And
Okay.
so he put, yeah, I can't say Boggs didn't contribute to him. I all I can say is I don't hate Boggs. I don't
No,
like it.
I think Rolo was the one with more vitriol for Boggs, right? That was his swan song, his lifetime achievement award of winning the championships and getting the
Yeah,
rings.
kind of akin to
Clemens,
Ray. Kind of
Clemens,
akin, yeah.
Greenwell.
Yeah,
Kind of
listen,
akin to Ray Bork getting traded from the Bruins to the Avalanche for him to finally win the title at the end. Uh, Only kind of like the inverse of that because that was seen as like almost doing Bork a solid to like, wow, this guy's been toiling away for years and years and years, and let's try to trade him to a place where he might actually be able to win a title.
all right,
And
all right, hold on. I'm sorry. I get where you're going with this. Let me throw this out there, okay? And try to answer this honestly if possible. Boggs left the Red Sox, you said in 93, right?
yes,
94, was that the year? Was that the first year the Marlins? No. Who won in
94
94?
'94
first year
was
of the
the strike,
Marlins.
right?
It was Marlins. Okay. It was the Marlins.
Marlins and Rockies.
Yeah, okay. So that was the first year of them, right? And then they won in 97.
Yeah, the Marlins won in '97. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Had he said, you know what? I'm gonna join the upstart Marlins.
Mm,
And he was part of their World Series team in 97.
mm.
Would you be singing a different tune about him?
Actually, I probably would.
Yeah, it's because you're short sighted and you hate Yankees.
He's not going to let this go.
But
Why would that be a different tune?
because the Marlins were an upstart with absolutely no history of winning.
Until 97 when they had a stacked roster of all-stars that they got from other teams and smart trades.
And I'll tell you what, if Boggs had been on that team, he may have still been in the twilight of his career, kind of, on fumes, not being as much of not as much of the great player as he was on their '80s Red Sox team, but he would get credit as being he's the guy who's been through it. He's given this young upstart team some cred because of all the experience he has. Versus the Yankees, they don't need any of that. They're the Yankees, and
I think the
and
one
so it
thing
just yeah.
that we're kind of forgetting is that at the end of Boggs's career with the Red Sox, he was not playing well. It's same as Clemens. So he deserved to be let go, quite
Yeah, oh
frankly.
yeah, no, I'm not saying he didn't. But how many times have you seen players that are let go because they had a bad year or two or their contract
Yeah.
wasn't renewed
Yeah.
and they went on to have good careers and nobody
Yeah.
really sits there and says, "Well, they don't deserve to have good careers after that because they didn't have a good year with us."
Yeah. No, I mean, Edgar Renteria won a World Series MVP after, he came to Boston.
Mhm.
Um, but I think, um, now I kind of get what I think Quinn's talking about. I think what gets our ire is that they they complained about the way they were treated at the end
Mm.
and what happened with them at the end. And the truth of the matter is, they didn't earn their way back. They just didn't. They earned their way back with the other teams, but not with us. They didn't play well at the time with us, and there could have been a lot of reasons for that. Clement's reasons were steroids. He
Okay.
got
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
married
No,
with
no. Listen,
steroids.
Clemens, I think, and I can't tell you, I hate Wade Boggs. I don't like his face.
Yeah.
Quinn, I'm with you. I don't like his face.
Yes,
I
the
did,
freaking
but I'll tell you
mustache.
what, I don't know why you would discredit his abilities. So I'm looking at the '97 Marlins team, and you're talking about how if he was like the journeyman who kind of like taught the team how to play, right? On that team, there's one guy that I'm looking at on the roster. This honestly probably, I would say honestly maybe two guys that were on that roster that you could sit there and say, you know what, they were that journeyman guy, and you forgot who they were now. You have no idea who they are. The only reason why you care about Boggs is because he went and played for the Yankees. You don't care
Yeah.
that one of the greatest managers of all time, Moises Alou, was one of the outfielders on that team and helped to bring that team to prominence and win a World Series.
Yeah.
Or Bobby Bonilla, right? We don't think
Moises,
about that.
I only associate Moises Alou with wanting to kill Steve Bartman after you foiled that
Yeah.
catch in that game when he was on the Cubs.
Yeah.
Great. But you know what? He was one of the journeymen who sat there and brought that would have given you respect for for Boggs, right? But now the funny thing is that happened against the Marlins, right? And he was on the other side of that. He was on the other side of a Marlins World Series.
Mm-hmm.
But that was him.
Mm-hmm.
So again, why? I'll tell you what. Okay, I'm going to tell you that when Giambi left my team for the Yankees and jumped on a team that perpetually kicked my team's ass in and out of the playoffs after that, I will tell you that I loved that boy when he played for me, and I hated him after. And he got tied up in steroids too, right? He did. But I'll never tell you that he rode the coattails and didn't contribute to that team. And it was a swan song and, get the participation award for it, right? I hated the boy because he left me, but he was still a hell of a player. And you know what? He was nowhere near as good as Boggs was. Even Boggs out of his prime. Giambi was never that good.
Never won a title.
What?
Huh.
Never won. Johnny didn't win a title
Yeah.
May not have.
No, he didn't. Yeah, I don't think he did.
because he was on those A's teams when the Yankees won,
Yep.
and then he went to the Yankees, but then the
Yep.
Yankees didn't win
They didn't win
until
until
'09,
09. Yep.
and
'09.
and
Yeah.
and I think he was off by then.
Yeah. He was with the Indians probably at that point. But yeah, doesn't matter to me.
Well, I mean, Greco, I don't have anything else to say other than you're just a more evolved human being than I.
Oh, no. I'm just curious. I'm just curious. I'm not trying to, if anything, I think I'm more Neanderthal than you are because you're so enlightened with your forward thinking, right? I'm the
I am
archaic one.
I am um I uh I resort to the more base instincts of my character when it comes to sports. I can say that much. I get I get a lot more I get a lot more black and white and a lot more uh yeah, I think I've alluded to this in past podcasts. Sports hate is fun. It's it, it it's it, it, it And that's part of the reason why sports are fun is because it does create this nice little bubble where you can just be like, fuck this team. And you kind of feel justified in it. And I'm like, oh, well, they're trying their best. Yay, sports. Like, no, fuck the Yankees.
Yeah. Listen, ready? Ready? Here's my list. Fuck the Giants.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck the Rangers. Angels. Astros. Mariners. Reds. And you know what? I'm getting over it a little bit more, but fuck the Dodgers too.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I
I
hate the
still
Dodgers too.
I
Mm-hmm.
still remember the Eckersley giving up the home run
Yeah.
to Gibson. It hurts my feelings. But I'll tell you what, I can still respect the players that play for them. I hate them when they're on it. And that's the other thing that I think is funny about Boston fans. And I appreciate your enthusiasm. I appreciate your passion.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll tell you what, that guy could be the best player that ever lived. The second they leave you, especially if they go to the Yankees, man, they fucking suck. Man, they're the worst. They're assholes. Look at their stupid faces. They shave. Johnny Damon cut his hair. He looks like a prick.
You know what's interesting though? I didn't feel as strongly about Damon as
Because he
uh,
has
uh,
no
uh,
arm.
uh,
And he was handsome. I mean, he was handsome.
well, Damon, like just in terms of him going to the Yankees, I remember being like, "Oh man, why don't you go to the Yankees for?" But like aside from that initial, just kind of like, "Oh, that fucking sucks." It he contributed. Like it was almost kind of like, "All right, fine,"
All right.
and fairly well.
Well, let me ask you this. Did you initially feel the same way about Ellsbury? I know hindsight 2020. You're
Oh,
pretty
oh,
you're pretty excited.
oh, Ellsbury was one of those where I was just like, "What the fuck are the Yankees doing?"
Yeah.
Like we were watching him enough where we knew that he was soft and he had a flash in the pan great season in that 2011 year where he stole a lot of bases and hit way more home runs than he ever did in the rest of his career. And he just, he had one of those classic free agency years and he got paid and I think he got paid way more. Like that would have been for as much as I uh, complain about the Sox not spending money anymore. That was one of those at the time where I'm like, he's not worth that much. Like don't pay him.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. See, I thought you would have said the opposite because Ellsbury is one of those guys who left when he was still pretty young and he still had some prime left. And I would have thought that maybe you would have thought he was coming into his prime, which I think is what everybody else thought until hindsight hit. He
He
just,
he always, he was one of those that unfortunately, Boston loves its dirt dogs. And sometimes that can be to maybe our detriment because then maybe we don't appreciate talent as much as we should. Case in point, Boggs. But uh but
I'll tell you what, I don't think you're in the majority of Boston fans who dislike in your feelings on Boggs.
I think he's tied to a lot of emotion, Boggs. The sports fan that I am, uh, I get emotional about people that are uh, propped up that shouldn't be. Like, let's say you have somebody that's touted the greatest coach of all time when he's not even anywhere fucking near it, and you have a guy, who, granted, took over a team that and made the greatest quarterback of all time. But the truth of the matter is, when he didn't have that guy,
mm,
uh, not only did he not win, but he made decisions that hurt the franchise.
mhm.
And if it were me, and I've said this in the stands at Gillette Stadium many times, and I've had a lot of things thrown at me, I said I would have fired him after he benched Malcolm Butler that day.
Mm,
I would have fired him. I'd be like, "You're out. Get the fuck out."
mm.
gone. And that's kind of the way I take a more controversial stance, at least in terms of Boston fans.
Mm.
Uh, but I think when I look at at McNamara, um, just the colossal lapses in judgment were unreal, like just unreal. Um, and I see why Boston fans hate him.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah. No, I get that. Now, does that go along with where would you weigh McNamara compared to Little?
Mm.
so I have a controversial opinion about that too, and I'm definitely in the minority here. I did not have a problem with him leaving Pedro in there. I did not. They did not have a closer. They would Embry and Timlin have shut the Yankees down in that inning? Maybe. I don't know. I still think Pedro was the best option at that point. And the other thing that Grady Little said is that he didn't have Derek Lowe available, who was both a starter and a closer at one time in his career. So um, I think it's an easy thing to look at. Um, I, I've never thought of it as that simple.
So let me ask you this though. Little had how many seasons with Red Sox?
I think two.
Two,
Yeah.
right? And both were playoff
Yep.
contending
2002.
seasons.
I don't
2002, he was
think.
not. No,
No, he wasn't.
Yeah.
Okay, so just one. Just one. Okay.
just
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
What about McNamara? How many seasons with the Red Sox and how many were playoff contenders?
4 or 5.
4 or 5.
And to my knowledge, he only went to one
Okay.
playoff season. Um, so with going with your argument, Greco, so I think the reason why Little inspires so much ire is because his quote unquote mistake happened against the Yankees. So I think that was a big part of it.
Mm.
Me, I called in and blamed Theo Epstein because he's the one that built the team.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. Well, he heard you because he got you a closer after. Um,
Yeah.
he took him away from me. So
When I argue with people, I say, I am wrong, but I'm not wrong a lot.
I like it. I like it.
And I think, but that was the first year they did the bullpen by committee. It
Yeah.
was an abysmal failure,
Terrible idea.
abysmal failure. And I thought it was unfair to Grady Little to do that, but I'm definitely minority opinion there.
Well,
Was
let me
that?
tell you. Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Quinn.
Matt, have you watched the comeback documentary series yet on
Yeah,
Netflix?
no.
Uh, Grady Little doesn't bathe himself in glory in that thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, maybe they paid him to be on it. I don't know how those documentary things work when they bring them in for those talking head segments. But
Yep.
I mean, he doesn't help shine any. He doesn't show a lot of humility, I would say, or a lot of like self-awareness or accountability. He's he's not the he's not the most ginormous asshole I've ever seen, but um yeah
He's a contender. He's not quite
he
Boggs, but he's a contender.
yeah, yeah.
That's unfortunate,
Mm,
because, um, you know, my biggest trigger, arguably, in my life is a lack of accountability,
mm,
um, and owning your shit. And that's unfortunate. I think he wasn't put in an easy situation. And, when you're a manager or a coach or anybody, you can only go with what you have, particularly in
mm,
baseball. The difference with McNamara was he had other options. I don't think Grady Little, well, I guess Grady Little did, but you know, McNamara had a viable defensive option behind Buckner.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Grady Little had a viable, but I can't say that either. He didn't have the option that McNamara had. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you this: the bullpen by committee,
Mm-hmm.
was that because attrition? They just didn't have it, or is that
No, they went
by
into the
design
season that way. They went into the
Yes.
season that way.
with the idea of they were just going to do that for the whole year, not
Yes.
necessarily see who kind of took the lead and run with it. It was just kind of like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, here's how we're okay.
It's probably because they didn't want to spend money on it.
Yeah.
Um, or the nerds wanted to be right when we all know they're not.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'll always fight against nerds too.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I
They're
like it. I like
wrong
it.
most of the time.
But
Stupid
they were
nerds.
right. They were right about Folk though.
Well, yeah, they had to have a 7-game series that they threw down the toilet in order to get him.
Mm.
They didn't learn from analytics, they learned from stupidity.
I
Mm.
like it. I like it. Well, who else? So, and I don't know. I'm just kind of spitballing this. I'm curious. Who was a better option for them? And kind of preying on the fact that you said that you felt he was one of the more impactful players the next year. Who, and I don't know this, but who was available in 2003 that might have been able to fit that role and change the course of that franchise?
I don't remember. Um,
Who did you have in that role in 2002? It had
uh,
to have been somebody.
Derek
If
Lowe
this was
was
the
in
first year,
2001. I
Yeah.
know Derek Lowe was a closer in 2001.
yeah,
Well, and Derek Lowe closed out the A's in
Yes.
game five
Yep.
of the ALDS that
Yep.
year, but was he just not available that night because of how much he had worked him, or was he
Yeah.
injured that game?
Yep. Because of the amount of pitches he threw either the night before or 2 days before. So um, I don't know who they could have gotten uh, in free agency that year, Greco. I don't know. I'm hard on closers because I always compare them to Rivera, who's head and shoulders above everybody. But
You want me to you want to get me to talk nicely about a Yankee? I'll talk nicely about Mariano.
the one
yeah,
unanimous
You know,
selection to the Hall of Fame.
yeah.
and I
Not
do. One of my favorite moments was when the Red Sox finally won the World Series, and the next year in our home opener, when we got our rings and the banner was raised, we were playing the Yankees, and they were doing the whole official like introductions of the whole rosters. And when Mariano Rivera got introduced at
Yeah.
Fenway Park, the entire park cheered him. I believe it. And kudos to him. God bless him. He seems like such a nice dude. When he got cheered, he kind of smiled, and I think he even tipped his cap a little bit, which shows a nice, a nice humility. Like, oh yeah, you got me last year. Yeah.
He's a Trump supporter.
Oh, interesting. Oh,
He is. He came out for Trump. But I mean, I
that's
think he's the greatest postseason pitcher ever.
Oh yeah, yeah. And that one pitch,
Um,
one
Cutter,
pitch,
just Cutter day
accidentally
after day.
came across it in a bullpen session.
I mean, if you, his biggest failure was the World Series against the Diamondbacks, right? Well, maybe the Red Sox, 2004. But if you look at the failure of the World Series against the Diamondbacks in Game 7, Mark Grace gets a bloop single in the center field to start the rally. They throw down a bunt. He throws it into center field. The guy goes to second. And then the guy who hits the hardest ball the entire inning is Tony Womack. This
Yeah,
guy, like this big,
yeah,
hits a double down the line. And then, Gonzalez hits one off like the handle of the bat of a pulled in infield. That's his biggest failure in the postseason. And it's because, you know, he had like one hard hit ball the entire inning.
yeah, yeah. Guy was a beast. Guy was a beast. And just so I looked up your options for closers
Yeah.
in 2003, And it looks like the only guy who had any real significant experience that was available was a guy named Rick White.
Mm.
And he went to Houston. He had 12 saves the year before.
Rick
So not a
White.
lot. Not a lot out there.
Hmm.
Not a lot out there. So
Yeah.
the Red Sox maybe did a good job in not spending some money on something, waiting for a Folk to become available the next year.
One
And he
guy that
wasn't
was
a
in our
hard thrower
bullpen.
either.
Oh, Folk
Yeah,
was not. No,
no, he was
no,
a
not
big
at all.
like palm ball changeup guy.
Yep.
Yeah, he was the opposite of what you think about. I mean, so just to add a little narrative to my team, we lost Keith Folk and we got Billy Koch. Do you guys remember Billy Koch?
I do.
Came from
Oh,
Toronto,
yep.
went to Oakland, and he was this. He looked like like Demon Chris Rock. I'm sorry, not Chris Rock, Kid Rock.
Kid Rock.
Kid Rock,
Uh,
where he had like this goatee that was like pointed, and he all he did was get up there and just throw fire. And he didn't,
Wow.
again, he wasn't throwing 105, but he was, back in the early 2000s, hitting close to 98, 99 on occasion. But his stuff just was hard and moved. And he was such the opposite of a Keith Folk. And later on, he was the opposite of a Jason Isringhausen.
Hmm.
I mean, he really was the antithesis of some of the more successful closers that we had.
Just by chance, do you guys remember who started Game 7, the Grady Little game for the Yankees?
Was it Clemens?
Mhm.
I believe he was pulled in the third inning.
Oh,
Oh yeah, we got to him early because we had the lead for a lot of that for the first like 2/3 of that game, and then Pedro was
Mariano
giving it up.
Rivera pitched more innings than you, fuckface.
Take that.
I love it. I love it. Well, that seems like a punchline.
Hmm.
Gentlemen,
This
it's
was a
been
fun
real.
discussion.
Yep.
It was a fun discussion. It certainly did not disappoint.
Hmm.
And we meandered around the bend and over the woods and discussed Wade Boggs way longer than we expected. But I just can't let it go when the I all I was looking for was some rationale. But I mean, Boston, so whatever.
Sports hate is blissfully free of rationale, Greco.
That's very true.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah,
very
I get
true.
it. I get it. I get it. I get it. But we're fairly for the most part. I'd like to think we're fairly analytical when we're talking about some of this stuff.
Hmm.
So when when
Hmm.
when there is that fervor that tends to be a little on the side of his face looks punchable because he shaved. Um, it certainly it's like a fly to a flame for me. I'm certainly gonna at least investigate. So um, I
As well, you
appreciate it.
should.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, gentlemen, it's been real. Until next week, um, I'm
Going
gonna
back to
end this
Tuesday.
and we'll talk about what we're gonna do.